The Duggar residence in Springdale, Arkansas, had white drapes that let in the morning sun. As usual, there was a lot of noise in the home from kids giggling, the aroma of breakfast, and Michelle's gentle voice beckoning for everyone to come together. The youngest daughter, Josie Duggar, who is now 19, was standing silently by her room's window, deep in meditation. The world no longer hoped for a frail preemie like her. She had developed into a strong, inquisitive young woman with aspirations that extended beyond the boundaries of her family's rigid society. She was still regarded by her parents, Jim, Bob, and Michelle, as their miracle child, fragile and in constant need of protection. However, Josie had started to want for independence, to experience life outside of family expectations, restrictions, and preaching. Josie met Zach Taylor, a 22-year-old good-hearted man who was a music student at the local college, one afternoon while she was helping at a community center. His lifestyle differed greatly from hers, and he was not a member of their church community. But something about his cool assurance and soft humor appealed to her. Instead of telling her what to do all the time, he actually listened to her when she spoke. They were friends at first, assisting with charity campaigns, discussing dreams, and giggling over trivial matters that seemed like secrets shared in an other universe. Josie gradually started experiencing a new sensation every time she saw him, a warmth and a flutter in her heart. It was more than just love. It was the excitement of being alive for the first time without her family's continual supervision. Her thoughts would flow like waves as she sat by her window at night and wrote in her journal, "Why does it feel bad to feel happy?" She was aware of her parents' rules. No unsupervised dating and no emotional intimacy without plans to get married. However, her feelings for Zach were not rebellious. It was pure, kind, and real love. Weeks passed. After family prayers, Josie started slinking out to meet Zach by the ancient oak tree on the outskirts of town. There, beneath the stars, they would discuss everything from freedom to faith to music. Sometimes Josie would sit close to Zach as he sang quietly and played his guitar, feeling her world grow beyond the boundaries that had been placed around her since she was a young child. Secrets, however, tend to whisper too loudly. Josie's older sister Jana caught the smile she was trying to hide one evening when she arrived home later than usual. Questions started to surface. Where was Josie? Why was she beaming with such subdued happiness? The Duggars had always been a rigid family. Love was something that only ever happened after parental sanction. Michelle saw Josie's preoccupied conduct, including her sudden need for privacy and her phone tucked under her pillow. Ever cautious, Jim Bob started to feel something was amiss. His girls had been brought up to be obedient to the law, and to maintain their purity till marriage. He was concerned that his youngest could be hiding anything. Josie's phone buzzed one Sunday afternoon when she was assisting her mother in setting the table. Zach sent her the straightforward message, "Can't wait to see you tonight." However, fate was not kind to her. The phone fell out of her grasp, and the screen briefly illuminated, allowing Michelle to recognize the strange name. The atmosphere froze. Michelle's soft voice became suspiciously harsh. Someone called Jim Bob. The family got together, one question after another, in a tone more apprehensive than irate. With her words stuck in her throat and her heart racing, Josie stood mute. She wanted people to know that Zach was good-hearted, that he respected her beliefs, and that this was not a sinful or embarrassing situation. However, the space felt oppressive. Josie sobbed by herself in her room that night. Her heart was immediately heavy with confusion and shame as her secret world was revealed. Rain started to fall outside, gently tapping against the window, the same pain through which she had once dreamed of a world that now appeared to be disappearing and watched stars. However, something inside of her resisted breaking. Even if it meant defying the norms she had been taught her entire life, she wasn't prepared to give up on love. Thus started the silent conflict between a daughter's emotions and her parents' beliefs, a conflict that would put the core of what it meant to be a Duggar to the test. There was an uncanny silence on the morning following the discovery. Typically, the Duggar household was filled with the sounds of chores, laughter, and mellow gospel music. But all the hallways were silent that day. Josie sat by herself on her bed, holding her journal to her chest as her eyes swelled from the tears of the night. Michelle and Jim Bob were already up downstairs. Concerned and furious, they had talked for the majority of the night, attempting to figure out what had gone wrong. Michelle had conflicting feelings for her daughter, Yet she was unable to disregard the regulations that governed their household. In contrast, Jim Bob was angry yet afraid of losing control, and watching his daughter disappear into a world he didn't comprehend. The family was gathered in the living area when Josie eventually made her way downstairs. Her siblings sat in silence, some with worried expressions and others with curiosity. Jana stood in the corner, silent worry shining in her eyes. Tension permeated the air. Jim Bob started talking, his tone steady yet strong. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. Josie's delicate heart was pierced by the disappointment in his tone. He inquired about Zach's identity, their conversation, and how they met. With shaky words, Josie attempted to explain that it wasn't wrong and that Zach wasn't a nasty person. However, her parents appeared to be growing more aloof the more she attempted to justify her emotions. Michelle sobbed and trembled as she stated that all she wanted was to keep her kids secure, pure and unharmed. Jim Bob's expression hardened as he said that Josie was too young, and that they needed to break up right away. Josie's chest constricted as she stood motionless. Her home's walls, which had previously been a sanctuary of safety, now felt like a cage. Her world started to get smaller over the course of the following days. They took away her phone. She was no longer permitted to visit the community center. Michelle kept her occupied with family devotionals, Bible studies, and housework. They seemed to be attempting to remove Zach from her heart and wash away her emotions. However, love is not something that regulations can take away. It waits for the slightest spark while hiding in silence. When everyone was asleep in the middle of the night, Josie would open her window and gaze out over the moonlit fields outside the home. She knew Zach was also thinking about her somewhere. She missed the way he made her feel seen, his effortless compassion and his laughing. She penned a little note one night because she could take it no more. A few words on a sheet of paper in a notebook. They discovered, "I am unable to see you. However, I do not want this to be the final chapter. Don't forget me, please." With her heart pounding, she crept out of the house after midnight. As she walked to the ancient oak tree where they used to meet, the cold Arkansas night enveloped her. It was a testament to their covert love, standing tall and silent beneath the stars. She mumbled, "Good night," and tucked the letter into the tree's hollow, where Zach had previously left her letters. Zach discovered the note in the community center the following day. He read it with shaking hands. He was astounded by how rapidly everything had collapsed. He was aware of the Duggars' bad reputation and their stern religious convictions. However, he couldn't simply leave Josie. He made the kind decision to stand up for her. After a week, Josie found a letter concealed within a book that her sister Jana had lent her. Zach had managed to get in touch with her somehow. His comments were hopeful inside. "Josie, I'll wait for you. How long it takes doesn't matter to me. Being bold enough to stay together is what love is all about, not breaking the rules." Her eyes welled with tears. She grinned for the first time in days. However, she had no idea how much hardship would shortly follow that modest gesture of hope. Josie unintentionally placed the note in her Bible one afternoon while tidying the living area. Michelle's heart fell when she opened it later that night. She couldn't ignore what she saw, but she didn't want to discipline her daughter. She shook and rushed to Jim Bob. His face flushed with rage as he read the letter. The altercation was much worse that evening than it had been previously. The family got together once more. This time, Jim Bob spoke louder and his words were piercing and brimming with annoyance. He claimed that Zach was misguiding Josie and dragging her away from her family's principles and her faith. Everyone who loved her would stop trusting her if she kept doing this, he warned. Josie sobbed as she tried to explain that this was not rebellion. It was affection. Sincere, genuine affection. However, her remarks struck the indestructible barrier of tradition. Through her tears, Michelle pleaded with her to pray and seek God to lead her heart. Josie nodded, but she felt more isolated than ever on the inside. Josie sat at her window that night, feeling the storm outside mirror the one inside her heart, as thunder rolled in the distance and rain began to fall once more. Like the tears she could no longer contain, the rain made trails down the glass. Zach was sitting in his car somewhere far away, holding onto the little bracelet Josie had given him in the same rain. The maelstrom that engulfed them both was one of faith, love, and difficult decisions. The hardest part of their narrative was just getting started, even though neither of them realized it yet. The days that followed seemed to go on forever. The stillness between Josie and her parents was deeper than ever, and the air in the Duggar house felt oppressive. Every exchange was forced, cautious, and courteous. Jim Bob completely avoided Michelle as she attempted to discuss faith, hope, and purity, acting as like nothing was wrong when it was obviously not. Despite appearing calm on the surface, Josie's heart was yelling within. Every time her heart beat, she missed Zach. The independence and feeling of being accepted for who she truly was were more important than the relationship. Every area of the home served as a reminder of the life she was supposed to lead, one that was full of tacit obedience, family schedules, and restrictions. Her heart, however, yearned for something genuine, something unconstrained by the beliefs of others. Her sister Jana, who had always been the family's silent observer, was the only person who could console her. Jana saw the waning of Josie's spark. She knocked softly on Josie's door late one night while everyone was asleep. She returned her phone, the one that had been taken away, to Josie without saying anything. "Take care," Jana muttered. "However, you deserve a dignified farewell if you love him. Don't allow your guilt to be your only voice." Josie had trouble falling asleep that night. The idea of meeting Zach once more raged within her like an unquenchable fire. She finally sent him a brief note before daybreak, the first one she had sent him in weeks. "Tomorrow night, meet me by the oak tree. One final time only." The world appeared unnaturally still the following evening. A faint orange glow painted the sky as the sun went low behind the fields. Josie sneaked out of the home wearing a plain white sweatshirt, her heart racing. Every step was both risky and liberating. After passing the well-known fences and crossing the dirt road, she arrived at the ancient oak tree, which served as a quiet witness to their hidden world. Zach was waiting there already. Time seemed to stop when their eyes locked. They were silent for a long time. The world appeared to disappear until only the aroma of autumn leaves filled the air. At last, with tears in her eyes, Josie took a step closer. The months of love, guilt, and dread came crashing together. All she could do was grasp for his hand, wishing she could be angry and ask why life had to be so complicated. Zach cradled her as if he thought she could disappear. They spent hours discussing choices, faith, and love. Zach acknowledged that he had attempted, but failed, to move on. In the hopes that her family would eventually comprehend, he had prayed for her. Josie listened, caught between the world she wanted to build for herself, and the one she was born into. Zach put his palm on her cheek and said, "You don't have to choose between faith and love." As the night grew darker, "If you allow it, they can coexist." The barriers she had erected around herself were broken by those words. She understood for the first time that having faith did not have to equate to being afraid. Perhaps love wasn't sinful. Perhaps it was the purest manifestation of the life that God had bestowed upon her. Whatever happened next, they vowed to be resilient. Zach handed her a tiny silver necklace with a crucifix pendant before they parted ways. "Remind yourself," he urged. "Belief and love can coexist in the same heart." Josie concealed it from everyone by wearing it under her clothes. It was her covert bravery sign. However, the Duggar family's secrets are seldom kept a secret for very long. Jim Bob saw the small silver chain protruding from Josie's collar during family devotion a few days later. He squinted his eyes. "Josie, what is that?" he inquired. The room went cold. Josie paused, her fingers automatically reaching for the jewelry. After an excruciatingly long period of stillness, she muttered, "It's from Zach." The explosion happened all at once. The chamber echoed with the thunderous voice of Jim Bob. The father, the guardian, the man whose home was based on discipline and faith. He got to his feet in a rage. Michelle's eyes welled up with tears as she attempted to soothe him. She didn't want the yelling, the embarrassment, or the heartache. Josie would no longer be permitted to leave the house by herself, Jim Bob announced. Not even community service. They have no pals outside of church. She was to be watched over at all times. Something inside of Josie refused to budge as she felt her world crumble once more. She had experienced freedom, and it's impossible to return to being invisible after you've experienced what it's like to be seen. She put the necklace around her neck, a picture of Zach, and her journal in a tiny bag that evening. She had no intention of fleeing just yet. However, she required mental space to remind herself that her heart was still her own. She observed the dim, gloomy glow of her family's home's lights from her window. She still secretly cherished her father's strict love, her mother's prayers, and her siblings' laughing. However, she was equally aware that where freedom was restricted, love could not flourish. The same breeze that had earlier carried her laughter to Zach was rustling through the trees outside. "I'll find a way," she said in a whisper into the night. In some way. The moon rises above the Arkansas hills as the camera gradually moves away from the house. It is steady and silent, keeping watch over a girl who is caught between two worlds and a love that is too pure to end gently. The storm was still going strong. It was just starting to take shape. The next week flew by, filled with constant stress, fake grins, and hushed prayers that never seemed to make it to heaven. In her own house, Josie felt like a ghost. Every second of her day was observed, and every action was scrutinized. Carrying the burden of her parents' displeasure, her once bright spirit now moved through the silent hallways like a shadow. Michelle made an effort to communicate with her, but her words were constantly tinged with fear that her daughter's spirit was failing. Jim Bob became increasingly aloof, immersing himself in church and work meetings as though discipline might patch the unseen fissure ripping through his family. Beneath the quiet, however, Josie was developing a strong inner strength. Not rebellion but insight. She sat on her bed with her journal open one night while everyone else was asleep, writing frantically in the faint light of her bedside lamp. The words flowed out like a mixture of bravery and confession. "I cherish my family. I cherish my religion. However, I also adore him. Why are the three unable to share a single heart? Since love is the finest thing I've ever experienced, why does it always feel like sin?" She hesitated, tears in her eyes. She was aware that she couldn't continue to live divided. The truth was now more important than the dread of being discovered again. Warm golden sunlight poured through the windows the following morning, perhaps a silent blessing. When Josie arrived downstairs, her parents were seated together. On the table between them, the Bible was open. She paused for a second, then moved ahead steadily and composedly. She whispered, "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you." Startled by her tone, Jim Bob raised his head. Michelle extended her hand, her eyes soft yet unsure. Josie inhaled deeply, her hands shaking a little, but she spoke firmly. She started talking honestly and without anger. She described how she had met Zach, how he was courteous to her, and how he respected her convictions. She informed them that her goal was to develop rather than resist. She remarked in a broken voice that she needed them to see her as more than their miracle baby, because she could no longer live a lie. Jim Bob's face initially stiffened, but as she went on, something changed. It was impossible to ignore the sincerity in her eyes because of the conviction in her words, the way that love and grief were intertwined. "Josie, you're still our daughter," Michelle said, her eyes welling with tears. "We only wish to keep you safe." With her own tears streaming down her face, Josie knelt next to them. "I understand, Mom. However, defending me shouldn't include separating me from my own emotions." Except for the sound of gentle sobbing, the room was silent. The family that had appeared to be so sure of everything suddenly found itself in the precarious position between comprehension and control. Jim Bob's voice was low when he finally spoke. "Josie, I don't get this world you desire." Although he spoke hesitantly, there was a hint of resignation in his words. "But I see you're not that little girl anymore. I'll try to listen, but I can't guarantee I'll agree with you." Not yet, it wasn't completely accepted. However, it marked the start of something novel. As the sun started to set that night, Josie went outside to the porch. The scent of hope and rain filled the air. She took out the phone that Jana had given her back and dialed Zach. His voice was soft and unsure as he responded. "Josie, are you all right?" Despite her tears, she grinned. "I'm all right now. I informed them. I told them. But it wasn't simple." After a little period of stillness, Zach's emotionally charged voice began to crack. "You have my admiration." They had no ambitious plans. No meetings in private. No spectacular getaways. Just a pledge that they would proceed cautiously, honestly, patiently, and with faith. Josie stood beneath the same sky that had once guarded their forbidden love that night. The wind carried the subtle aroma of magnolia blossoms, and the stars shone softly. Not because the fight was finished, but because she had at last found her voice. She felt at peace for the first time. Michelle prayed quietly inside the house, asking for wisdom on how to better love her daughter, not how to alter her. Sitting next to her, Jim Bob was silent and contemplative as he gazed at the open Bible, wondering if faith could overcome fear. Josie is seen standing by herself in the yard as the camera moves away from the Duggar residence. Her hair is blowing softly in the breeze, and the cross pendant is barely visible around her neck. She murmurs into the darkness, "Love does not diminish my faithfulness. I become more human as a result." And the fury inside her heart starts to subside for the first time. Months went by. The chilly spring rains gave way to the warm golden summer light as the seasons subtly changed throughout Arkansas. Although things had started to calm down in the Duggar household, nothing was the same as before. Softer voices, more pauses, and more questions now reverberated through the walls that had before echoed with absolute certainty. Josie's strength has increased along with her years. Even while she continued to attend church, assist out around the house, and follow family traditions, something had permanently changed inside of her. She was no longer afraid about being misinterpreted. She and Zach's relationship had evolved from one of concealment to one of openness, being careful, respectful, and genuine. The air between them no longer seemed taboo, even though they only met seldom and cautiously. Zach started going back to the community center and volunteering alongside other town residents. His name was slowly but surely brought up again, this time as a person rather than a rumor. Even Michelle started to see that this youngster who had created so much trouble wasn't the enemy, despite her initial reluctance. Michelle whispered to Josie as she assisted her mother in the kitchen one afternoon, "Does he treat you well?" Josie hesitated, her heart quivering. "Yes, Mother. He does." Michelle's eyes were sparkling as she nodded. That was a small sentence, but to Josie it felt like a door opening, a whisper of acceptance she had been waiting for. "Then I hope he keeps doing that." Jim Bob changed more slowly. He completely skirted the subject for months. However, he had started to realize inside how much control had cost him as well as Josie. He was standing by himself on the porch one Sunday after church, watching his daughter and her siblings laugh. She exuded radiance. She wasn't defiant or lost, simply alive. That night, Jim Bob called Josie outside as the sun began to set. He spoke in a softer voice than she recalled. "You know, Josie," he said, "the doctors warned you might not survive when you were born. We gave thanks to God every day that you were still alive. Perhaps I overlooked the fact that I have no authority over your life. You have the right to live." Josie's eyes began to well up with tears. Her heart was both broken and healed as she moved forward to embrace him. "I'm grateful, Dad," she muttered. The following week, Josie experienced something she never anticipated. Zach's first visit to the Duggar residence. He carried a little bouquet of wildflowers and arrived trembling. Michelle smiled cautiously at him at the door, and Jim Bob stood behind her, his arms folded, his face impassive. Despite the high level of stress, Zach talked respectfully and quietly. He spoke candidly, without trying to impress them, about his aspirations, his family, and his faith. Michelle nodded gently as she listened. Jim Bob didn't say much, but as Zach got up to go at the end of the night, he extended his hand. "You look after her," he whispered softly. It was faith, not approbation, and that was sufficient. The once forbidden love started to mend what it had damaged in the weeks that followed. Josie's siblings provided her with modest support, some overtly and others covertly. As usual, Jana watched quietly as her younger sister at last found her own serenity. For the first time, Josie didn't hide when the media, always eager for Duggar family rumors, started speculating about Josie Duggar's secret romance. In response to a question about it during an interview for a family update program, she responded with a gentle grin, "I think faith and love don't have to conflict. If you allow it, they can walk side by side." One line got viral. While some applauded her bravery, others chastised her for deviating from custom. Josie didn't care though. She had discovered that being truthful was more powerful than being flawless. Months later, Zach took Josie by surprise on a balmy evening at the community center where it all started. Soft music was playing in the background, and the lights were dark. He held a little velvet box in front of her. With a quivering voice he said, "Josie, I don't want to hurry you. I have no desire to engage in combat. All I want is to walk with you wherever life leads us. Josie's eyes filled with tears as he opened the box, revealing a plain silver ring with a cross carved on it instead of a diamond. A pledge, he murmured. Belief and love will always go hand in hand. Grinning through her tears, she nodded. Yes. Amid the warmth of string lights and gentle laughter, the two embraced. Everything felt real if not flawless for once. Michelle smiled a little as she watched a video of the event on her phone at home. Jim Bob sat next to her and remained silent, but he couldn't help but smile as Josie's laughing came through on the video. We witnessed Josie crossing a sunny field with her notebook in hand as the film comes to a close. She narrates in a quiet voice. I've always believed that having faith entails abiding by the law. Perhaps, however, faith is actually about having faith in that love. It originates from the same place as grace in all of its manifestations. The camera moves up, capturing the expansive blue sky and the towering oak tree in the distance. The words appear as the last image fades to black and gentle music rises. Inspired by genuine strength, the bravery to love fearlessly,